taking LSD once a month on the beach for 3 months in a row, it kind of shined me up like a sparkly new coin. And this sort of like burnout, or this sort of feeling of, trudging through the hospital residency program kind of evaporated with those experiences. And it really got me to reflect deeply about my life and who I was and where I was going.
Welcome to Entrepreneurs in Recovery, where we explore entrepreneurship, resilience, recovery, and the healing potential of psychedelics. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. We have a very special episode today. Before I get into that, if you could take a moment, maybe before or after listening to the show, to give a like on YouTube or a follow, a subscribe, we'd really appreciate that. Or maybe even leave a review on iTunes or Spotify. This helps people to reach the show. Thank you to everyone who helped me to reach 300 subscribers on YouTube. I appreciate that. I think since then, we've got another 9 subscribers. So thank you so much for following this show, liking. And what it helps is more people to reach the show. If you have certain guests that you want me to interview for Entrepreneurs in Recovery, you think they're a good fit, send them my way. I would love to speak to them. So thank you. Today's episode is with Dr. Ben Malcolm. Dr. Malcolm is known as the Spirit Pharmacist. This is his second time coming on the show. The first episode was one of the highest downloaded by far, the most watched by far episodes, because Dr. Ben got into trauma and psychedelics. He got into many topics that are often missed in the psychedelic space, such as contraindications. If someone is on an antidepressant or an SSRI and they want to engage in psychedelics, what do they do? How long do they need to taper off? Is it 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months? So we get into all these different topics in the past. And in this episode, we dove in even further. We even answered some questions from listeners like you who have different questions about psychedelics and even nursing and breastfeeding. So I really hope you appreciate this episode. This is another deep dive with Dr. Ben Malcolm. And we also have a special offer at the end, which is for his upcoming course series and the courses that he has recorded. So I really hope that you enjoy this episode, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Dr. Ben Malcolm, welcome back to the show.
It's so great to be here again, Jesse.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be interviewing you now, this time in Costa Rica. Last time I was in New Hampshire. I was in a whole different place in my world, but nonetheless, we did an epic interview. So anyone listening, go back to that episode we did about a year ago. Amazing topics we covered. We may cover some of the same ones today, but one of my goals is to bring up some new things and all the things that have come up since I've moved to Costa Rica, which is obviously a place where there's a lot of people journeying into medicine, and there's a lot of different retreat centers. And I've spoken to a lot of different people. So I'm really excited to dive into your zone of genius and dive into all these topics that are so critically important, especially as we move through this post-COVID, the aftermath of COVID that is slowly being felt, the ripple for people's mental health and addiction, as we see that increasing in many ways. So I'm excited to bring you on, have this discussion. So welcome back, my friend.
This is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, last time we did introduce you, and I will mention that Dr. Ben is a board certified psychiatric pharmacist. And, like in the first episode, if you listened, you're very, you're very passionate about drugs since a young age. And I'm going to let you tell a little bit of your story, and maybe you can tell us a little tidbit of something you didn't tell us the last time, but just let us know who you are. And then we're going to dive right into some of this content. Just let the audience a little bit of your story.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I think I would have to go back and listen to the story I told last time to kind of make sure I'm not being too redundant and figure what details I could add. But I would say that, there's an educational path, and then there's the sort of like cosmic travel log, I guess, or the types of experiences and things I had along the way. And there were probably several kinds of inflection points that were important in all of that. But I really just had a deep curiosity and fascination around psychoactives as a teenager, and particularly drugs that cause addiction, because there was reality TV shows happening about that time that kind of piqued my curiosity. And so I really stumbled across psychedelics that way, is looking at other drugs that were regulated as illicit substances. And it became pretty clear just from reading through, anecdote after anecdote after anecdote, that the trajectory of either the MDMA or psilocybin user was quite a bit different than the trajectory of the cocaine or heroin type of user. And oftentimes it didn't result in this kind of insidious tolerance and, essentially substance use disorder or addiction that many of the other illicitly regulated substances really did end up or cause in a lot of persons, right? Like not universally, but a lot of persons. And most of the time, persons would report great times with psychedelics. And even if they said, you know what, that really wasn't that great of a time, it was difficult for whatever sorts of reasons, they would oftentimes say something else about how they felt the next day or in the few days afterwards, where they really felt different or better in some type of way. And that was curious or fascinating to me as well. So intellectual curiosity preceded the experiential curiosity, and that's probably a little bit different for me compared to many other teenage males. I think the experiential curiosity typically exceeds the intellectual curiosity, or they tend to dive straight into things without doing a whole lot of background research, whereas I had really read extensively about the compounds before I even came to the decision, yeah, I think I want to try them. Had a wonderful time doing that. And I don't know, the trail kind of went cold after undergraduate, to be honest. I had a bachelor's in pharmacology. I studied pharmacology because I was just interested in pharmacology and the study of drug mechanism and drug action. So I chose a major that really just sort of fit with what I was interested in overall. And it wasn't until a good friend reintroduced me to high quality LSD as well as ritual ayahuasca use that I think something kind of like really shifted. Because at this point in time, I'm a little bit later in my 20s. I'm in graduate school at the time. It's a real grind if you've ever been to graduate school. It's not an easy period of life overall. And I was just burnt out and tired at some point. And taking LSD once a month on the beach for 3 months in a row, it kind of shined me up like a sparkly new coin. And this sort of like burnout or this sort of feeling of, trudging through the hospital residency program kind of evaporated with those experiences. And it really got me to reflect deeply about my life and who I was and where I was going and what parts of it were determined because I wanted to go there, and like what parts of it were determined because of different sorts of pressures in the world. You should be this because it would be good or whatever. Like who am I doing some of this stuff for, I guess? And it really sort of clicked that there was something in the psychedelic experience that was profoundly helpful as far as, healing, reduction of mental health system symptoms, being able to, right, like deeply reflect upon parts of our lives that maybe had been more challenging than others, and really gain some sort of perspective and put them into place so that I could kind of arrive at the present moment and start charting the course for the future that I really kind of wanted to have for myself. So like a process of individuation, essentially, like dealing with your past so that you can be really who you're meant to be, whatever that is supposed to kind of mean overall. And then ritual ayahuasca use too. This was an interesting one. A dear friend introduced me to it, and we were at some festival in Santa Barbara. I think Lucidity Festival. It was about like 2 weeks away from the ceremony, and it was one of his dear friends that was serving the medicine. Great guy. The person that served me medicine ended up becoming like a real, I would say, like mentor and like almost like father figure to me. And I ended up sitting in his ceremony several times over a period of about 10 years or so. But you're in your pharmacy graduate sort of mode or program, and somebody comes up to you and they're like, hey, next Friday, or there's an ayahuasca circle. Do you want to come to it? And immediately I'm kind of thinking, well, I have rotation that day for pharmacy school, and I can't really afford that. I'm a student on a budget. And so, immediately I was just got like my knee jerk reflexive response was just like, oh, I can't do that. I don't have any money. And he just looked at me and said, well, I'm sponsoring you. I said, oh, that didn't work, did it? I thought that was just going to be like a magical horseshoe toss excuse to get out of it. And I couldn't. Like, all of a sudden, it was like, that's not a barrier. Are you coming? It's like, well, I have to lie. I would have to take the day off of pharmacy school. I'd have to say that I'm sick or something like that, which is true. I am sick. I'm tired. I'm depressed. I'm burnt out, right? I need to purge. I didn't know any of this at the time. I'd never drank ayahuasca yet, right? But in my mind, I'm kind of like, oh, well, that's something I really can't do. Like, I'm a person that shows up. And if you feel bad, you take a Sudafed, you still show up. That's kind of how I'd always been growing up, right? And so I did it. I worked up the courage to call it a day and take off early and go up there, and I drank the medicine. And I was just sitting there, in the first hour or so, waiting for it to kind of come on, and some of the music sorts of starts. And all of a sudden, there's just this voice in my head. And it's like, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And I was like, oh, that's a funny voice, huh? It's like, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And it was like, this went on for, I don't even know how long, like 2 or 3 minutes, right? This voice is like, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And then eventually I responded. Like, eventually, it was funny how much it had to like say it before there was any response, right? But then there was, well, for what? For lying, for cheating, for stealing, right? I tried petty theft as a teenager, right? I shoplifted an item out of Goodwill or two, right? I cheated on my first girlfriend when she was 16 because I was egocentric and didn't know how to treat people well. But I got caught, and I saw how badly it hurt her. And that's when it clicked. It was just kind of like, you can't do that to people. Like, you just can't be that way. And so I'd stopped all of this stuff by age like 19 or so, right? Like, there was a few years where, growing up in toxic masculine US culture with some not great people around, I tried on a few things that really weren't me. They really weren't me, but I did it. And I felt serious levels of guilt and shame, and I regretted it, and I learned from it, and I didn't do it again. But here I am, 28 years old, finishing pharmacy school, singing an ayahuasca circle, and still beating myself up and pretending like I'm a bad person, right? When I'm feeling an extreme level of guilt just for calling it sick for a day to go do something that I absolutely needed to really do, like, looking back at it. And so that was the first time I ever forgave myself, like, truly. And it was an incredible experience. And there was something that clicked there as far as like, oh, now, I can't say I fully understand it, and I probably don't fully understand it to this day, but I understood the power of forgiveness in a healing experience, or how we essentially, a friend or a coworker or someone like that could make some sort of mistake, and we could see that kind of mistake, and we could see it wasn't them, or whatever circumstance put them in that position, and we'd probably be able to forgive them relatively quickly and move on. But if it's yourself, it's like the judge just keeps sentencing day after day after day for something that you didn't mean to do, and you actually atoned for and changed your behavior afterwards. So those were some really powerful sorts of experiences that I think like took me in a direction of just going with a program and flow of pharmacy school towards a clinical pharmacist. And I still pursued that direction, but it was like, okay, now I'm pursuing that direction with the idea that I'm going to do something in psychedelics with it. And I was just very lucky too. I was in the right time at the right place. Whereas my sort of, I say, interest in psychoactives and psychedelics, it really started about age 16, in that period of time between when I was age 16 to sort of 28, 30 or so. That's also the period of time where the psychedelic renaissance took off. And then all of a sudden there was a bunch of medical research in psychedelics. And so there was all of a sudden an evidence base for a pharmacist to really stand on. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to stand on it and I'm going to do it. And I could probably explain a whole lot more and just take up a whole hour with a whole story. I'm a chatty Cathy like that. But hopefully that was sort of similar and sort of different the last time.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot deeper. I think you mentioned something about the story, but you went much deeper into it. And I appreciate the part of, the forgiveness and your individuation. And I think that's a really important part of someone's journey, whether they understand that or not, is individuating and having that moment that can come from psychedelics. It can come from many different things. It can come from extreme pain on the journey, and or it can
Yeah.
come from, it can come from an experience with a plant medicine or ayahuasca. And I really appreciate you sharing that, and sort of also tying into, it's almost like it shows you in some ways, like you were just on the path, and then it was like, oh, you're just so happening to do this at the same time as the Renaissance is moving forward. And I think maybe there is coincidences, maybe there's not, but it seems like a meaningful coincidence that it would happen at the same time. And then
Yeah.
here we are now talking about
Yeah.
addiction, mental health, psychedelics with the Spirit Pharmacist. So really
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, there's like this piece in it too where I sort of like think back, and I just sort of think back at like, wow, yeah, those are things that I did when I was young, and I did change. And I would absolutely hate if a person took those, I don't know, almost like one-off behavioral occurrences in my life and then sort of thought, well, that's who the person is, right? And I actually feel like I see this fairly regularly these days in, maybe, I don't know, in pop culture terms, it's called like a cancel culture type of thing. And that oftentimes some event that a person participated in that was wrong occurred 20 plus years ago. And it still seems like there's this snap judgment of, well, that's who they must be today. And frankly, there are persons that do not change, and that is who they are today. And they don't belong with the platform that they have and the microphone and the voice that they have. Right. So I'm not opposed to canceling persons that don't change, but I also think that we should have some level of bandwidth and leeway for an understanding that no human being is, well, I shouldn't say no, but most human beings are not going to make it through their life without trying on a behavior or two or just doing something that is just frankly wrong and that they're ashamed of and that they're not going to do again. And it can be very difficult to kind of parse the wheat from the chaff in this way, but that's the task that we have to do. I think we have to get interested in that level of discernment about the human characters that are in our lives, in whatever sorts of reasons, and really practice a level of forgiveness when we believe that we have a person that made an error and doesn't want to be that person anymore and is not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're in a highly polarized time, right? I mean, I think about my life literally 20 years ago, I was arrested, and it was like a huge defining moment of my life. And most people who listen to the show or who listen to our stories, they won't view you as petty theft when you're a kid, or me getting arrested at 22 years old. And, but here we are today, and we look shiny and sunny and tan because we're in Costa Rica, but it's because, we've been through that. And, yeah, if I was still living from that story, which I did, I punished myself brutally bad for that. And I've certainly atoned for those sins and from that time till now in 20 years. But yeah, I think it's a perpetual cycle that can continue to help people who have a lot of shame project on others. It's a really good way to project someone's own pain and their own, their own shame. That's the best way I can put it, that they would project and cancel someone, even though like someone like you or me, I'm 20 years now into my recovery process from that date. I mean, literally 20 years. And obviously that set the course of my life. And I could have easily just kept that life going, but instead I turned it around to then today have this platform, Entrepreneurs in Recovery, because that idea of recovery, not from substance use disorder, that's one thing. It's the recovery of why was I in so much dysregulation of my nervous system that I would put myself in a position to break the law in the way I did, which was directly through a dysregulated nervous system, trauma, and addiction. And so now I understand that. And that's why I have a platform and bring people like you on so we can understand what the F happened, right? What the hell happened there? And that's really what we're doing. We're being scientists, self-scientists, and trying to study and what really took place. And I became a psychotherapist because of that. I became all these things because of that defining moment, and some others that really caused a lot of shame. And to be honest, the people that came to support, a lot of them, it was for them to get regulation from my recovery, not so much to support me, but they got regulated by my own journey of taking recovery so serious. And so I love where this discussion's going, and I would love to dive into, um, obviously people are seeking. You talk about this on your platform on Instagram and some of your videos, but people are seeking psychedelics for deep emotional pain, for trauma, for addiction, for anxiety, for depression. It went from me sort of seeing this from a lens of the 12-step abstinent model in the worlds I come from, even psychotherapy, to people being on this extreme cancel culture of psychedelics in the abstinence space, to like people 38 years sober coming to me now privately saying, I really need help. And I really want to start to microdose, or I want to start to look into the transformation that's possible with psychedelics. So with that said, from your studies, I think you have at least 19 clinical studies, or so I'm not talking to someone who just has the anecdotal evidence. We have anecdotal, and we have some science behind it. But what do you see as the most beneficial psychedelic, including ketamine assisted therapy? Well, including ketamine, what is the most beneficial psychedelic that you see right now to help with, let's just start with like a dysregulated nervous system?
I think it's a tough question to answer, honestly. I feel like there's a lot of ways to skin a psychedelic cat overall, and there's probably a lot of different reasons a person could feel dysregulated in some way. I really do feel that psilocybin mushrooms is one of the most physically safe psychedelics, and also one that is helpful for just a variety of issues and problems, and really doesn't have much of a habit forming or dependence risk to it at all. In fact, most of it seems either neutral for addiction or it's anti-addictive. And I think particularly for substances like alcohol, it leans on an anti-addictive kind of side of the spectrum. Um, but honestly, I think that, like I said, like there's a lot of different ways to skin a psychedelic cat, and a lot of the time it's like, what substance is going to regulate my nervous system? And I think that maybe even reframing the question to kind of what environment of psychedelic ingestion and support around that environment or in that environment is likely to help regulate my nervous system the best. And so I think as much, if not more important, probably more important than the choice of psychedelic itself, is going to be the container that the person creates to have their psychedelic experiences in, and then maybe how supported they are afterwards, right? So I'm kind of thinking that if we can connect a person to themselves, connect a person to nature, and connect a person to community, they're probably going to end up with a regulated nervous system quickly or over time. And so maybe sort of thinking about, where am I now? Why is my nervous system dysregulated? And which one of these key ingredients is sort of missing the most? And focusing on some of those as far as setting up my either sessions themselves, or sort of, I would say, like integration activities, if you will. And that would be like I give that response to people all the time, because they really do want to know, like, which psychedelic is going to heal me the most profoundly the fastest. And it's like, well, a lot of them can do a lot of really great things for people, but if you use high doses in scary environments where you're not very well prepared, the chances of getting any more regulated with your nervous system isn't that great overall, and you might actually get more dysregulated in some way. So that's it. It's like the psychedelics seem like they're neuroplastic, or they can make a person a bit more moldable in some ways. And so, if we're gonna mix up some plaster, let's make sure that we have our mold that we're going to pour the plaster into really well defined before we start mixing the plaster and pouring it places, right? Because you really don't want to have a piece of plaster with no mold, right? It's gonna sort of go all over the place in some kind of ways. And so, when I was growing up, like when I was in middle school, right, it'd be like, don't use psychedelics because they're going to change your mind. And then this guy, Michael Pollan, pretty famous food journalist, right, wrote a book called How to Change Your Mind. And then everyone wanted to use psychedelics, right? So the truth is that psychedelics probably can't change your mind. But in what way are you changing it? In a mindful, intentional way where we're molding ourselves towards this individuation or healing kind of scenario process, or in a willy-nilly haphazard kind of way? Okay, well, one of these is likely to get you much closer to regulating your nervous system than another. And so controlling the set and setting, or really mindfully creating your container for psychedelic ingestion, would probably be my number one tip on how to get the most out of it, rather than kind of which one is best for everyone in the population, right? Because it's hard. There probably isn't one, or I don't know what it is if there is one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great response. I really appreciate it, because we talk a lot about that on the show, about the power of an empathetic witness, having someone there to witness you after some type of event that happens, a really challenging divorce, a challenging traumatic breakup, or something that happens. And a lot of times people are going into healing because of some type of event like that happened, but they didn't have proper community support environment. And then they go, maybe psychedelics can help. I'm on 6 different medications. Maybe I can, come to a psychedelic and maybe get off half of those and start to heal. And, maybe, but also we have to look at the community support, the environment, the container. And this is so often missed. It's like, come to the jungle, drink some ayahuasca, and then go back to your environment. And guess what happens? There's destabilization, and there's people worse off now because they didn't have 6 months of integration support. They didn't have that ongoing support, a minimum of 8 weeks, something there. And I really appreciate that response, because it's so easy to just dive right into the different medicines that are out there when we're not just looking at the basic foundations, which is really where I come from too, right? I met you through the 5 training, right? The 5-MeO information and vital education training, a 1-year training about trauma-informed 5-MeO DMT, facilitation. And that was really teaching me how to have safety checklists, safety protocols, like so much pre-integration, and then the experience and the ceremony, then post, which is the integration support for many, many weeks, if not months. And I think that gets lost a lot. And so I really do appreciate that response, because it's not recognized enough. And I see that a lot, when people come to Costa Rica or different places, and it's like, come for a week, go back into your world. And that integration support, if missed, we have many people now who are helping people who have been destabilized because of a psychedelic experience. So appreciate that response. That's yeah. And also too, I also wanted to mention about addiction, right? So there are studies about psilocybin helping with alcohol, substance use disorder, or alcoholism. And I know there's a study here, psilocybin assisted therapy for alcohol use disorder. So we're seeing psychedelics for addiction happening. So just I want to just pick your brain for a moment about addiction. I have a lot of people listening because I have the word recovery. If you have that word recovery in your title, everyone thinks this is about recovery, AA, 12-step, and obviously it's about that and about 100 other things identified to recovery. But what have you seen when it comes to psychedelics and addiction recovery?
Well, I guess I've seen a few things out there, right? And I've actually seen it go both ways. Like I've seen persons that are in recovery that maybe do start to use microdosing and start to use a little bit of cannabis. And then a few months goes by and all of a sudden they're sort of thinking along like, uh, I'm tempted to use these things at times that I never really set out to use them. And that sort of doesn't feel very good to me. And so I'm actually going to tighten things up again. And I haven't really met somebody that's sort of like, oh, I started microdosing and then I relapsed back to my previous drug of choice and things are really out of control now. And like, it hasn't been like that, but there's been some persons that have been like, I really treasure the sobriety that I achieved on my recovery path. And I was sort of thinking that adding a little bit of microdosing or cannabis was going to feel maybe as rigid as like a prescription or something like that, but it really doesn't feel that rigid anymore. And these things are too likable, particularly the cannabis. And I think I'm going to like pull things back again. And I think that there's a number of other persons that have been helped in really positive types of ways. I think that if you're going to approach psychedelics for treatment of substance use disorders or addiction, again, sort of thinking through like, well, what is the best set and setting for psychedelic use if I am trying to beat some type of addiction or get on to a more solid path of recovery? It probably isn't fly to Jamaica for a week, eat mushrooms 2 times, go back to my exact same street block in New York City with the same chicken stand and guy that hangs out there, or the same dealer that texts me when there's a new batch, and the same set of friends that are all still using, and things like that. Like you're going to have to address the sort of environmental and behavioral sorts of cues that are there. Um, so really sort of thinking it through again, kind of like, all right, so how, let's just say I could go to a retreat and it would get me to a place where I'm not using heavily. Maybe it's abstinence, maybe it's a serious reduction in use overall, right? Some of the studies with psilocybin, some of them focus on abstinence or sobriety, some of them focus on reduction of heavy drinking days as the outcome. Because it's, if you can get a person so that they're not drinking heavily every day, that's a serious health benefit that we conferred, even if they're not necessarily completely stopped using alcohol, period, overall. If you're seriously physically dependent upon a substance, depending on which substance it is, you might actually really need to do a detoxification procedure first. So, for example, with alcohol, if a person is really, really drinking lots of heavy liquor and things every day, then they can go into physical withdrawal symptoms where they're at risk of having seizures, psychological effects associated with those things too, like psychotic symptoms, like delirium tremens, right? And so the studies that have examined psychedelics for alcohol use disorder have required persons to not be physically dependent at the time of psychedelic ingestion. If that means they go to a detox first, then they need to kind of go to a detox first. So the idea of sort of using specific psychedelics to treat acute withdrawal syndromes, probably not great on its face outside of things like ibogaine for opioid or maybe cocaine detoxification. That actually seems pretty legitimate and bona fide. But right, like, can I use LSD to detox from opioids? Probably not, right? Can I use MDMA to detox from alcohol? No, like you really can't. So sort of again, like I don't necessarily think that the standard supports that a person has as far as their addiction recovery program are broken or wrong or need to be tossed out the window so that we can just use psychedelics instead. I would actually prefer to see a person take some pages out of those playbooks and integrate or add their psychedelic experiences at times that maybe they had results and ambivalence. I'm going to make an attempt. This is the day or date. All right, great. Let's prepare for that by timing some type of administration of a psychedelic on that day, or maybe in the couple of days preceding it. Fortify the resolution, put wind in the sails, right? Journal about it, like things like that. Maybe setting up experiences a little bit along the recovery path. You know what? If you actually go through with this and do this experience and leave the alcohol behind, we'll do it again in a month. I I don't have all the answers for substance use disorders. I'll say it's like a little bit early days in some ways. Like the sort of like pilot study proof of concept things I think are there. Like we haven't done any sort of study on substance use disorder that's produced a negative result so far. But to say that it's like a slam dunk home run with several randomized trials, like definitively proving they, help people quit all varieties of substances, that's a little far compared to where we're at too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of the people that brought me into the early days of psychedelics and some of the people that mentored me through, they actually asked for my book as a guideline to addiction because they didn't know enough about addiction. I'd been in recovery, abstinent, 100%, no psychedelics for over 15 years when I chose to bring on psychedelics as a way to heal more of my nervous system, get into deeper trauma work. And I'd done a lot of research before I ever even ingested a psychedelic. But when I did that, I happened to have written a book, and it's a guide for people with addiction. And I had my mentors ask me, can we recommend your book as part of the integration process? Because we're getting all these people coming for addiction problems. So I really, appreciate that response too. It's like, it's not, it's not just going to be utilizing microdosing or even having a macro dose of some of these substances as a way to treat. And obviously, like we're seeing ibogaine treating, opioid use disorder. We're seeing that move through different, like Texas just passed that law, moving to, I think it's to the next stage of whatever the process is to get that legalized in Texas for ibogaine for opioid use disorder, which is,
I think it was a really big funding measure, I think is what it was.
yeah,
I don't know if it was any like legislation that was passed. I just think that it was like a huge allocation of state funding to essentially study it further. I think.
yeah. Well, this is what it says. I think it actually passed May 22nd in a historic bipartisan move. The state of Texas has approved $50 million in state funding. So is that
Yeah,
what you're
well,
talking about?
like it passed as in the
Oh,
legislature
yeah.
passed a bill to fund research
Gotcha.
rather than they passed a bill to outright legalize it,
Ah,
ready, set, go. Yeah,
Gotcha. Oh, I'm glad
yeah.
you clarified that because I think a lot of people, because of the clickbait on Instagram and on
Oh
the
yeah,
computer, it's like,
you see it
oh
all
my
the
God, it's
time.
legal.
It's
Yeah,
like you see the headline. It's like FDA approved study of MDMA, or no, FDA approves MDMA. And you're like,
yeah,
wow, for
yeah,
real? And then you click on it. It's like the FDA has approved a protocol design for a new phase 3 trial that will be launching in 18 months and will have results in the next 4 years or so. It's like,
yeah. In
okay,
17
so they
years.
approved the protocol of a study design,
Yeah.
not they approved the drug, which is what the headline read. And it's just like, this is unfortunately misleading for people because people will read it and share it and not get to that granular kind of like, so what did they actually, oh, a protocol for a new study. Like, all
Right.
right, cool. Like, I'm like, it's not like I'm disappointed or something. Like, I'm glad that they approved the protocol for the new study, but the way the headline came across was clickbait. Yeah. There's a
Yeah.
word for it, right? It's clickbait. Yeah.
I got a question for you. What do you think about all these accounts being taken down? Psychedelics Today, Tricycle Day. Many of our friends, many people on my podcast I have interviewed recently, all have been taken down. What do you think about that?
Well, it sounds like censorship to me. I mean, I'm not a fan, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why they're getting taken down, like why they're getting specifically targeted though. Like whether it's something about like yeah, I don't necessarily know why. I
Do you have
can't
any
speculate
fear
on
of
the
that?
inner algorithms of Meta. Yeah.
Yeah. What about for yourself? Do you have any fears? Like I don't have any fears, but I have many episodes on psychedelics, heavy psychedelics in my.
Yeah.
Do you have any
Well, I don't
concerns
know
with
how
that?
many fear like I mean I run a social media accounts through Instagram or Facebook, but I don't necessarily post super frequently or um no, it would be annoying. It would be really, really annoying, right? But would I be like fearful that my like business would collapse if I didn't have an Instagram account? It's like I'd find other ways. Slash, actually, like in some ways, I've been kind of focusing on Instagram and Facebook. Why? I don't know, because that's where influencers focus on, or something like that, right? But it hasn't been very strategic. And I think in the last like few months, I've been like why not YouTube? Because I have so much more long platform video than short platform video. And so I really think YouTube is probably a better social media platform to focus on for long form video content, like generally speaking. And I'm not sure it has the same like censorship algorithms. And YouTube is like a legitimate internet search engine for persons now too. It's like the third
Number one in
biggest
the world.
search engine or so. Yeah, okay, yeah, you know the stats better than I do, right? So right, I'm not like rooting for my Instagram to get taken down or something like that, but um, it wouldn't be the end of the world to me personally if that occurred. Slash, in some ways, I might just be like, thanks for pulling the plug on me, so like I, can finally go do something else on a platform that I might enjoy more than whatever. Just yeah,
That's
like, I can't hang out on those platforms myself because going through it just, I mean, if you want ADHD, hang out on social
yeah,
media for a few
yeah,
hours every day. You will quickly have
or an
no attention
addiction.
span left,
Yeah,
right?
or an addiction to OnlyFans, because that's what I think it's so funny. It's like they're banning Henry at Tricycle Day, who we just interviewed a couple weeks ago, who was an amazing
Yeah,
guest. They're banning Joe Moore and Kyle on Psychedelics Today, who are only trying to educate since what, 2016, the public. But then
yeah,
if you go to my search and you go to these, it's just OnlyFans models that look underage. And I'm like, they're pumping this to me, but not like how to learn about and educate myself about psychedelics to keep me safe. Really interesting. It's a really interesting. It's a yeah. And by the way, I don't want to get canceled. I just want to clarify that. Yeah, Google is number one search engine. YouTube's number two. I don't want to get
okay.
canceled. So just want to make sure that I clarify that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So anyway, so I want to go down this path. You spent so much time in these areas of studying drug interactions and antidepressants and all these different things. But before we get into that, I have some people. The cool part about this show is people will email me or text me or call or whatever, and they'll just reach out and be, hey, can you ask this question to one of your guests? If you interviewed the Spirit Pharmacist, can you ask this question? So this is a question that I got, which was, couples are interested in MDMA assisted therapy. Obviously, it's not legal yet, but there's people who are engaging it in doing it. And so, with that said, someone who is a mother who is nursing and they were considering doing MDMA assisted therapy, what does your research show you about breastfeeding? How much time should you wait, or should you do it at all after? Should you end the breastfeeding, or is there a period of time where it'd be safe to breastfeed after an MDMA session?
yeah, yeah. So there's not very much data that's out there that's specific to MDMA in pregnancy or specific to MDMA in breastfeeding or nursing. But I think what we do know, generally speaking, is that amphetamines are not very safe in particularly pregnancy. And I also think nursing or breastfeeding as well. Like if I started to look through different classes of psychiatric medications and things, the amphetamine classes really do come up as like that would be really preferable to avoid at times that a person was pregnant or breastfeeding or nursing. The information that we do have is cohort based, meaning that they're looking at populations of persons that are just naturally using ecstasy out there. And they try to do kind of like a case control type of design where they would match it to some other demographic of maybe pregnant women that were using other types of drugs, for example, but maybe not using MDMA as heavily or regularly. And those cohort studies do demonstrate that there's a neurocognitive type of delay in the offspring, slash they don't seem to meet the same neurocognitive benchmarks up to the first couple of years of life. But in those cohort studies, I forget the numbers off the top of my head, but it's something like they ingested an average of 80 tablets of ecstasy during the pregnancy, right? And so at the same time, it's kind of like that is a very apples and oranges sort of comparison to a person that wants to try MDMA assisted therapy. They didn't use MDMA at all during the pregnancy, they gave birth and now they're breastfeeding or nursing, and whatever sorts of struggles are coming up, or maybe not even a struggle, maybe just like take their intimacy and relationship and partnership to a new high, which I think is a great application of MDMA assisted therapy. Maybe even a better application than like to save a relationship or get it out of serious hot water would be to take a relationship that's relatively, it doesn't have to be perfect, but relatively healthy at baseline and really kind of elevate it to a new sort of place. What I do know also is that all like pregnancies and birthing can be complicated and different, right? Like some persons have premature babies, some persons have gestational diabetes, some persons go to full term and have a healthy newborn and there's zero complications and to the birth or the pregnancy, right? So I might be thinking about some of those types of things as far as like, okay, is there something really special about my pregnancy, the birth, the first couple of months of life, perhaps? But it does seem that the information we have suggests that by 6 months of age, the infant is relatively robust, and typically drug exposures tend to affect it a whole lot less than, say, a newborn. And again, that's with the assumption that it wasn't born like 2 months early and things like that. The half-life of MDMA, or the time that MDMA plus its active metabolite and maybe some of its neurotoxic inactive metabolites stay in a person's body or system, is probably somewhere between 48 and 96 hours overall. The vast majority of MDMA and MDA is going to be metabolized and eliminated in the first 24 to 48 hours. So maybe you have somebody that's a little farther, hey, I'm 8 months past the pregnancy, I've been nursing and breastfeeding, I've got a robust milk supply. I can freeze a supply ahead of time and then actually do a technique called pump and dump, or pump the milk and discard it for that 24 or 48 hours after I ingest MDMA and use a supply of frozen milk at that time. Or maybe the infant's partially using milk, partially using formula, and it's not a big problem to rely on formula for a little bit of time, particularly that first 24 hours, right, where I think you're really feeling that, hey, there's definitely going to be metabolites of MDMA. They're pretty likely going to concentrate in breast milk in that period of time. So even if I was able to hold off on using that breast milk for about 24 hours, I'd probably do something pretty decent to limit the exposure that my infant would have at that time. So MDMA probably is not like a risk-free type of substance. It probably really does cross placental barriers. It probably really does concentrate in breast milk as a designer amphetamine. It's probably not great for pregnancy or newborns, but I do believe that there are also some ways that persons could take harm reduction measures and just limit the amount of MDMA that they're using overall so that it wouldn't have any real deleterious effects to their infant, or the chances of that would be really minimized, and they would still be in a pretty good position to really capitalize or gain or benefit. And I think sometimes there's it's such a touchy and sensitive subject, like overall the use of drugs in pregnancy or the use of drugs in a situation of nursing or breastfeeding. And it is a seriously individualized type of situation. Frankly, for some pregnant and nursing mothers, it might actually make a lot of sense to stay on an SSRI and risk the infant exposure to that rather than decompensate mentally and just not be able to take care of the child anymore, or the person's really struggling with some level of postpartum depression. I think that there's a lot of neurochemistry that is being elucidated with psychedelics. It's actually a really good fit for that kind of disconnected feeling or state that new mothers oftentimes get to for whatever sorts of reasons. And just sort of thinking it through too, it's like, oh my God, there's so many unknowns about psychedelics and pregnancy or psychedelics and breastfeeding. But what do we know? We're not giving the drug chronically. So the infant or baby is not chronically exposed to it. Logically, that's got to do something as far as risking potential exposure, potential side effects, potential neurodevelopmental sorts of changes the psychedelics are very powerful substances, and I really think they are powerful in the sense that they probably target neurotransmitter systems like serotonin that probably are critically involved in neurodevelopmental processes and things like that. So there might be a power to them, even with acute exposures, that would be reasonable to be cautious of. But I think just logically, what's more likely to give a person chronic side effects and toxicities, drugs that are taken chronically or drugs that are not taken chronically? And you have to bet on the chronic ones. A blog on my website about nursing psychedelics or pregnancy that really aims to curate the information that I've found about it. And then I think also just like write a little bit about my opinion. I think psychedelics like psilocybin and ayahuasca done in smaller amounts in persons that have experience with those are probably some of the safest ingestions overall.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that response. That was really helpful. Made a lot of sense. And yeah, I always appreciate when people reach out and ask me questions that I could bring to guests. So I feel like I don't really have a response to that. I think that's great. That's really helpful. And
there's Tracy T runs a group called Moms on Mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
And it's not exclusive about pregnancy and nursing, but that I think is a really nice community of persons that mothers can get plugged into and start asking each other what they've done, how it was, and be able to really talk with other persons that are in this situation and doing this without necessarily risking the sort of like judgment and stigma that could come along with talking about one of their other girlfriends that likes to drink wine at a soccer game on a Sunday morning, but mushrooms are very, very bad sort of friends, right? What other resources are out there? Mushwomb, M-U-S-H, Womb, W-O-M-B, is another website that actually is dedicated to the use of psilocybin mushrooms during pregnancy or nursing. And then there's another organization called Plant Parenthood. It's a play on words. Instead of Planned Parenthood, it's Plant Parenthood, like plant medicines in parenthood. And I think that would be another group of persons that I think would be great to see community if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Yeah, you know what's crazy is we were talking about the platforms that were taken down, and Moms on Mushrooms was one of them that was targeted as well. So it's just complete insanity, my friend. So thanks for sharing those resources. I definitely recommend checking those out as well. I wasn't familiar with the last one you said, but Moms on Mushrooms for sure. I've sent people her way, and and also like if someone's interested in coming back to the psychedelic integration and you're more in the sense of like you want a textbook on psychedelic integration, well, there's a book called Psychedelic Integration on Amazon, and that was part of the 5 training course I did. We studied the psychedelic integration book, which is on Amazon. Just type on psychedelic integration if you want a master's degree in integration. It's a pretty thorough guide. So yeah, so this conversation has been really, it's been really laid back. I really appreciate tapping into your zone of genius, but I also want to get into some other things like, it's hard to the direction. I'm gonna have to bring you on a third and fourth time because there's many things I want to get into, because these are common. Living in Costa Rica, it's very common that I bump into someone every day that owns a retreat center that's serving psychedelics, and so I have this question, which is, well, first of all, let's start with the. I'm trying to think about which way I want to go. So a lot of people, when I'm speaking to them, I will bring up the fact of a synthetic. Like I'll say to them, hey, oh yeah, that's amazing. You serve ayahuasca, peyote, all these things, all these sacred medicines. And then I'll say like, I've also found that, low doses of ketamine done, sublingually with a psychotherapist or, in different ways can be really helpful too for people who have dysregulation of the nervous system or treatment-resistant depression. And when I bring up that, there's a lot of resistance to the synthetic version of anything, especially even 5-MeO DMT, which is obviously, we know that the synthetic version, which we've talked about in 2 other podcast episodes, one with you on the last episode, and then one with Joel and Victoria from Tindava 5 training, that the synthetic version of these molecules is there for a reason. It's so that we can have different routes of administration. And there's also safety concerns with, for instance, 5-MeO, the Bufo alvarius, and the neurotoxins in the toad. We also don't know exactly how much medicine we're getting. So you know where I'm going with this. Where is that line with the synthetic versus the natural medicines? And, you're in Costa Rica, I'm in Costa Rica. These conversations come up a lot. And I'm not really able to have many conversations about synthetic molecules because it's very touchy. People want the spirit of the medicine, right? They want the actual spirit of the medicine. So can we talk about that a little bit? Your take on that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it just exists with the psychedelic retreat centers in Costa Rica, like overall. Like, I think I mean, come on, like you're running a business that focuses on delivering a certain type of experience. It doesn't surprise me, honestly, that some of the persons might be extremely opinionated or kind of like all in on the method that they have and, either somewhat ignorant or just dismissive of other types of things that could really help persons as well. I think the natural versus synthetic kind of debate just kind of goes round and round overall. And oh, I don't know. Like, is it possible that a molecule has a spirit? It could. It could, particularly if you think everything is consciousness, right? If you sort of think that, like, hey, like there's a consciousness to a rock, there's there's um, a pan consciousness to like the universe, even like, okay, like there's at least some kind of energy that it has, right? There's an energetic signature. Is that a soul? Is that a spirit? I don't know. I think in some ways, right, there's been a war on plants. There's been a war on these sacraments. And so maybe that pushes persons into corners where they feel very defensive because they've had to essentially fight for ayahuasca in the world or fight for the ability even for using something like bufo venom, right? Bufo secretion, right? You start calling a bufo toxin and it's not a toxin, it's just the toad secretes it. Right? Like, okay, well, I thought it secreted it to like stun prey or something like that, which seems close to a venom to me. But yeah, it's got like a toxic connotation to it if you use the word venom. I mean, I think like it speaks to something just like grander in society, like overall, and almost like where we started some of this stuff around like the polarization of persons generally and the intolerance or the inability just to hear something about a different perspective or something that helped a different person in a different way. And it's just sort of so outright dismissive in a very like black and white kind of way, ayahuasca good, ketamine bad. Okay, and there's not very much like, okay, well, maybe ketamine in this situation is not so great overall. And frankly, I don't know. You probably met them, right? I've met some persons that seem to drink ayahuasca every single weekend and walk around with their hape caripe like a necklace and they're blowing it up their nose dozens of times a day and there's nasty gunk coming out and, they're calling me up and asking why they have a sinus infection and things like that. And you're kind of like, I think it might be time to lay off the sauce a little bit and take some time, right? Definitely centers here in Costa Rica. And I've seen persons come in that are psychedelic naive and they drink the medicine and it's absolutely wonderful. And then they drink it a few more times, it's absolutely wonderful. Then they start assisting at the center and then sometimes it's great and sometimes they are having psychotic symptoms a number of months later. And there's probably some dark things that are happening in some of these centers, right? The one I'm thinking about doesn't have a great reputation here, overall, generally speaking. I don't know, like haters gonna hate. I guess if you're from the world of pharmacy and pharmaceuticals, I mean, I was literally indoctrinated, right, to think that natural products are unpredictable. You never know what's truly in it. You don't know how much you're going to get to a person. There's often going to be this other groups of compounds with nebulous effects that, on the one hand, maybe they help efficacy, maybe on one hand they make things more toxic, like overall. So the indoctrination in pharmacy school is very much like synthetic pharmaceutical, measurable, good, standardizable. But I mean, is that the truth, or is just that's the way the FDA regulator approves a medicine? It has to be standardized in a way that has a predictable way of testing it, because otherwise your experiments are a little apples and oranges, which creates this like wiggle room and interpretation of results. So they need things in such like this like exact, precise, let's say like almost like anal kind of way that almost like dictates that like can a natural thing even be a drug? It's very, very difficult. I mean, dronabinol or delta 9 THC is approved, CBD, cannabidiol is approved, but no whole plant cannabis has been approved by the FDA at this point. Why? Because the components of it don't have medicinal value. Well, the components of it have been approved as medicines. Of course, they have medicinal value to them. But the botanical variability of cannabis is a major wrench in the works for how a regulator wants to see what a medicine even is. And so then you get other groups of people that are like, well, I'm drinking the medicine. I'm drinking the medicine. It's like, that's not a medicine. It's like, what are you talking about? This thing saved my life. Of course it's a medicine. Like, I don't care what the government thinks about it. This is the medicine. It's not even a medicine. It's the medicine. If it's ayahuasca, right? The medicine, like the medicine of all medicines, right? It's kind of elevated on a pedestal in that kind of way. So I don't know what to do about it, man. Just stay cool. Keep if you're just running into persons that are so intolerant and so polarized that they can't hear that somebody else was helped by something else, or see that the world is complex and that good things have side effects and bad things have benefits, right? Like the person just is so closed in that way. I don't know what we can do, like chip away at it. Like I hope that they kind of like crack open at some point. But maybe they will, or maybe they won't. I don't know. It wasn't a great answer. Well, nothing definitive there.
No, it's great. I mean, I just want to have discussions about this. That's really
Right.
my goal. It's just, this is a really important platform for me to be able to bring up these conversations, because if we're going to be all about this healing and bringing indigenous wisdom and all these things, but then we're going to be just polarized and this is the way, the truth, and the life in this one area. It's like, oh my God, we're defeating the whole purpose of like, how do we keep people safe? How do we know, what works for one person may not work for the next person? Obviously, we see this with diet. We see this with so many things. And so in the psychedelic world, these discussions to me are like sacred. It's like, let's have the discussion, because I have mothers who have teenagers reaching out to me because their son or daughter is using LSD. They're using cannabis, and they're not just using it in a way that's abusive. They're using it because at times it has illuminated them to touch into this world of faith in God that they never even knew existed, because their family didn't grow up with any type of religious connotation. And now they're touching that with LSD. Now, of course, they're also doing it on the way to Burger King, and they're having a really bad trip. But that's it. You know what I'm saying? So there's such a nuance, this black and white thinking, which is what I can see sometimes back home in the States and here in Costa Rica. I just want to have the discussion. It's like, I would love to have someone come on here and bring in this deep indigenous wisdom and tell me that this is the way to do it. And it's like, well, let's talk about that, instead of making it like one person's right, because this is such a nuanced area, especially if you're coaching or a psychotherapist or doing some of the things I'm doing. I mean, we have case studies of people that, like, if I recommended them to do ayahuasca, it could destabilize them. But if I recommend maybe some type of microdosing protocol with integration support, or even low dose ketamine that is monitored with psychotherapy, that could be a better choice for them. And that's kind of what the point of the show is, right? Let's get different perspectives, recommend people. Someone's like, oh, you need to bring this guy on, he knows a lot about that, or she knows a lot about that, come on the show, like, let's talk about it. But there's a lot of extreme thinking in psychedelics, in medicine, in addiction recovery, in mental health. Oh my God, it's extremely polarized. So that's why we're trying to have these discussions and tapping into your wheelhouse of, the Spirit Pharmacist and what you do. Like, one of the things I love about what you do is, like, if I have a question about, okay, I got someone on, I literally have these people in my life, like people with, they're on 6 different medications, 4 different antipsychotics, and they want to come to Costa Rica. They want to drink medicine. They want to have these experiences. Well, what is the contraindications? How do we actually taper them off? Is it 4 to 6 weeks? And that's your field of expertise. So, I really appreciate what you do in that way. And I know we had some good rants in this episode, but like, your expertise is saving lives, bottom line, the way you consult with people to, know what are these contraindications. So let me ask you this: is there any new guides that you have? Because you have an incredibly robust guide I use as as someone who is in this space. Is there any new guides that you have for contraindications and psychedelics? Or
I haven't put any new, like I would say, like downloadable PDF resources out recently. I do have one on ayahuasca that I've been working on. It's been sitting on the word processor for way too long, and I'm hesitant to say or release date out loud because I have a lot of other projects that are also in the fire right now. Um, but one of the newest resources I have is the Clinical Pharmacology of Psychedelics, and it really aims to be a comprehensive course that focuses on a lot of what you're talking about. It focuses on, okay, well, like before we even start talking about psychedelics, well, let's talk about like mental health conditions, extreme versions of mental health conditions like suicidality, and how that may interface with persons that are desiring to use psychedelics. It features lots of different lectures on different classes of psychotropics that aim to summarize the drug interaction potential with a variety of psychedelics. So, antidepressants, anxiolytics, stimulants, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, pain relievers or analgesics, over the counter kind of agents. There are some sections of the course that focuses on specific therapeutic areas, or I'll say almost like specialized demographics or niches within psychedelic use. For example, like palliative or end of life type of care, or neurologic types of conditions like migraine sorts of headaches, cluster headaches, right? The regimens and sort of, I would say the sets and settings, or just the overall goals and approaches are going to be different if you're trying to heal PTSD and trauma versus if you're trying to break a cluster cycle of headaches. Okay, like, do I need to do the integration workbook when I'm looking for a neurological benefit? Maybe, because frankly, other stuff's probably going to come up at the same time. Like, maybe, right? It could be more than just a neurologic kind of application that you ultimately end up with there. But it's a very different sort of application. And then finally, the course has lots of case studies. So things that aims to essentially summarize a lot of what I'm trying to teach in the lectures into different sorts of cases or intake forms that are then accompanied with 8 to 12 question quizzes. So a person can hopefully really learn a lot about the breadth of mental health, psychedelic healing, drug interactions, and then actually test some of the knowledge a little bit. And no, frankly, it's very difficult to write cases on paper that are 100% like the real world. But hey, I mean, I come from teaching graduate education in clinical psychiatric pharmacy courses, so that's something that I really did do for a number of years as well. So I think that's a little bit like, okay, I'm trained and my background is in clinical psychiatric pharmacy. That allows me to give some pretty solid advice about mental health medications and tapering and things like that. I come from a background of academia and graduate education. So my ability probably to design and put together educational resources and convey concepts in relatively clear ways is pretty good. Slash, I've had, specialized kind of like practice in it. So I absolutely love what I do because I feel like it rolls so many of my skill sets and like passions together. And the clinical pharmacology of psychedelics is, it's really like a culminating course, right? It's the third in a three-part master series that I have designed. The foundation to psychedelic pharmacology is the first one. So the clinical application is kind of, that's what everyone wants to know. Like, what's the drug interaction? What's the drug interaction? But if you've never heard of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, I can explain the drug interaction potential, but it may not click very well. So I was sort of thinking along the lines of, well, how about a foundational neuropharmacology refresher course that aims to use psychedelics as illustrative examples? So it starts off with a foundation to psychedelic pharmacology and really just does that. So it talks about concepts, pharmacologic concepts like bioavailability. Oh, what's that? That's the amount of a drug that hits your systemic circulation dependent upon the route of administration used. Okay, how about an example? Ketamine, great example. If I give it intravenously, well, by definition, it's 100% going into my vein. If I give it intramuscularly, probably about 90% reaches there. If I give it intranasally, maybe about half, 50%. If I give it orally, pretty low, like 15 to 20% or something like that. So it can really affect, like when a person's like, well, I take a 200 milligram sublingual lozenge, and then someone else is saying, well, I take 100 milligrams through an intramuscular injection. Which one of those is going to produce a stronger experience? The 100 milligrams through an IM injection. Absolutely, because of the bioavailability, right? And probably the latency to the peak effects too. It's absorbed very, very rapidly through a parental or IM route. So anyway, you learn about basic concepts in the foundation of psychedelic pharmacology. And then you graduate to the pharmacology of specific substances. So the second course is psychedelic pharmacology by substance, and it aims to summarize 9 of the most commonly used psychedelics with therapeutic potential and really do a deep dive into each of those. Its mechanism, its metabolism, its clinical studies, its drug interaction potential, its adverse effects and toxicology profile, anything that we know about special populations, okay, that could be in there as well. And then this third course, which aims to sort of like sew it all together now, your neuropharm basics, specific knowledge of various psychedelics, and then the people that you're giving it to, right? Which is, ultimately what we're trying to evaluate when we're assessing candidacy for psychedelics or what the plan should be, right? There's so much of the time. And it's like Prozac and MDMA problems. And it's like, I don't know. You mean problems like at the dinner party where they're hanging out on bottles and on a shelf and talking to each other? Or you mean problems meaning that there's a specific person that's been taking Prozac for a number of years for a specific indication, and they may or may not have tried to stop that, and things may or may not have happened there, and they may or may not have any experience with psychedelics, and they're thinking about using MDMA. So how do you recommend approaching the situation? That's what you're really asking, but it's all boiled down to what I would call drug interaction in a vacuum, where it's like it's only about the drugs when, okay, like that can be important. It can be a little black and white. If it's ayahuasca and Prozac, it's a lot more black and white than if it's psilocybin and Prozac. Right? So sometimes that's enough and it is a deal breaker, but the vast majority of the time it's gray, it's clinical, and it involves evaluating the individual or person. So that's what I've been excited about creating over a number of years, really. I started putting this course series together in 2020 or so, and I just got done with the clinical pharmacology of psychedelics in the last few months or so. So it's been a real process, like putting this course series together, and it works pretty well. I have a psychedelic screener mastermind program now for professionals that uses that core series as the prerequisite or like sort of like foundational material to really get everyone close to up to speed or close to the same page, so we can start having really deep discussions about various cases that are complex and are not necessarily straightforward with simple answers. And there's a serious benefit to getting a group of people that are in different screening positions at various retreat centers and sort of brainstorming together. Hey, are we all thinking fairly similar here, or is there a real divergence in approaches? Because both of those things has a lot of value. So I know I'm skipping all over the place right now, and things got started with the. Do I have any guides that have come out recently? But that's really what I've been, I would say, like heavily pushing forward as far as my initiatives in the last like 9 months or so. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I'm glad we're kind of closing with that, because I want people to understand, listening to this episode, that when you're going to take a psychedelic, and there's countless people that have come to me now who want to ingest a psychedelic, they're having all the questions that are addressed in your courses, period. They're on 2 to 5 different medications, and they don't want to just, there's people that I know that don't even have a screener, an application before they ingest some of these psychedelics. They don't even have an intake form. It's very scary out there. And the people that do, they often miss the depth of some of the complications of what is going to happen. Like you said, if I'm on Prozac or another antipsychotic, and I'm also taking blood pressure medication, and I'm going to think about taking ayahuasca, or I'm going to think about over the course of 7 days, there's going to be 4 different medicines used. So your courses, your classes, your consultations are just priceless. And this is why I'm bringing you on a second time. I want this message to be out there. I want this to be accessible to all facilitators. I want this to be accessible to every person that wants to have these questions answered, and have them answered with tremendous amounts of experience, because people die doing psychedelics. People die taking Tylenol every year, but people die doing psychedelics. And we want to make sure that people are safe. And that's really what this is all about. And so with that said, I think last time we didn't have any type of special code for the listeners. Do we have a code this time, a discount for any listeners that want to do the Clinical Pharmacology of Psychedelics or the Psychedelic Pharmacology Master Series, which is something that is, to me, extremely juicy. Really something that I light up about, but something for the listeners.
You are the code, brother. So code Jesse, JESSE, will give anyone that's listening to this podcast 20% off. I think any of the courses or webinar workshops I offer, including the Clinical Pharmacology of Psychedelics or the 3-part master series. And yeah, it's hard. I come from a world of academia, where in academia, and just I think in pharmacy as a healthcare professional, like you're taught to be more modest than like salesman-y, like overall, right? So there's parts of this job that I've had to like learn over the last like couple of years. And so I'm not saying this because I enjoy being like really braggadocious or grandiose or some type of way, but I've had several professionals, right? I mean, these are psychologists, these are physicians, these are psychiatric, mental health nurse practitioners, right? That have taken several different psychedelic training programs through reputable organizations, that have taken my master course series and this psychedelic screener mastermind program now. And this chorus and consensus that I'm getting is this is the missing piece. I wish I would have gotten half of this information in any of the other sort of training programs. So I think that there's a lot of training programs that are very, very strong in helping persons to maybe understand a little bit about a specific medicine, but oftentimes even then, I think a lot of the pharmacologic information is lacking in depth, but they're very, very strong in helping a person to set up their space, their set and setting, maybe their preparation, some techniques for guiding the integration process. But when it comes to like, how do I just evaluate a candidate on paper? How do I collect that information? If I'm not confident in doing that, how do I create the resources or systems that is going to do that in a way that I'm dotting I's and crossing T's and not letting things slip through the cracks? Because I mean, I'll go metric, right? Is the gram of prevention is worth a kilo of cure. You know what I mean? Like the more that we do upstream of things to screen people effectively, the better it is, the safer it is. And frankly, people appreciate it. It goes into their set and setting when they think, you know what, this guide or this group or this center thoroughly checked me out. They really wanted to evaluate whether this is a good fit for me and whether it's safe to come. That's not a smear on your center or your operation overall. That's something that directly feeds into your participants' mental state and makes them feel more comfortable, confident, and safe when they actually show up. And that, kind of going back to the beginning, which psychedelic should we use? The one that's in a good set and setting. So I think it all sort of ties together in some ways. And right, I make my course. I mean, I have the screener program that does like do biweekly live calls and things like that. That's a longitudinally run live program. I'll probably be launching another cohort later this year in fall and definitely in January of 2026. But the Master Series courses are pre-recorded, accessible at any time. Again, they all have learning objectives and matching quizzes so persons can really understand, like, am I getting this and taking home the high points? And like Jesse, I'm just absolutely floored all the time on the sorts of kind affirmations that people have about the things that I'm producing, to the point that I have to be a little bit braggadocious sometimes because that's what people are telling me about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important. Like this podcast is called Entrepreneurs in Recovery. It's not called Psychedelics Incorporated, or it's Entrepreneurs in Recovery. We're celebrating entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial efforts. So, all day long, it's good to talk about, how you have these moments of being grateful and being having pride of what you've created, which is really helping people. And I know it's helping people. I took my training in 2023, and you were our featured professor, as I'll call you, to teach about all of these topics you talked about. And I took that I'm like a super serious note taker, and I wrote down almost every word you said. And then then we became friends, and I learned a lot more about you and what you're up to, and how many of my friends who are medical doctors and psychotherapists and uh, just in the medical profession that consult with you. It's a lot. So just, I'm really grateful we could have this down to earth conversation. And, like I said, at the end of the day, it's just helping people be informed for free. And that's why I like YouTube, and that's why I like podcasts, and, it's free. And someone can listen to this episode now and have this incredible episode of learning about, what happens and what should I consider if, like, someone is pregnant and they're thinking about, doing a MDMA assisted therapy or whatever. And I think this is one of the biggest reasons I'll probably bring you back again soon, and we'll go into some of these other questions that I get now because of our last episode. So I really appreciate everything you're doing. I'm absolutely interested in the next mastermind coming up. I think it's just so critically important, if you're in this space of serving any medicine, to have this knowledge. And even if you're not serving this medicine, to just have this information. So thank you, brother, for what you're doing. And we're going to get together real soon here in Costa Rica too. I'm excited for that.
Pura vida. I can't
Pura
wait.
vida.
It's going to be a real blast. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll put all the information in the show notes. We'll put that code in there, which would be my name, Jesse. And so brother, thank you so much. We're going to have you back soon.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you. And I'll just say one more thing. You reached out to me to do a podcast episode, and we did that. And this is the second time we're doing it. And there's a level of professional relationship that we've had. But one thing that I think was really special and unique about you when you reached out is you were genuinely and seriously interested in creating some kind of personal connection and friendship as well. And I oftentimes actually struggle with that a lot as a psychopharmacology consultant in this space, because frankly, I don't want to live in a hyper individualistic capitalist society where every single thing is transactional and I can't give anyone a piece of my time or something like that unless there's an energy transfer. But so many people don't want to be my friend. They just want to pick my brain and get their answers. And it's sort of like this Trojan horse of friendship or something like that, when they're really just looking for free advice. but that just has not been you. And you've just been a person that does reach out to me every now and again just to say what's up, just to say hello, just because you're in the same country. And I'm really looking forward to taking our professional and personal connection deeper here or wherever we may end up being. So blessings to you and blessings to this podcast, because it's a special person that can do both of those things and wear both of those hats, and honestly almost maintain two different relationships with the same person at the same time. It's a trick in some kind of ways. And out of all the people I've met in the space, you've just been a person that's done it very well. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. I really did not expect that. I really appreciate you saying that. And yeah, really, really, I'm going to sit with that and, receive. Thank you for that. And yeah, no, I'm serious. So for the listeners here, we're going to get together and we're going to have a good time in Costa Rica, but also just talk about the future and what's possible. And I'm really excited for what's coming next. I think there's something special, and thank you. I'm just going to receive what you said, and I'm excited too. And it's, yeah, I think beautiful things are going to come out of this. And I know when I mention you and I talk about you to other people, because I have a lot of close friends who are in the space, and, it's just like, there's a massive respect, and I want to keep people safe. And I also want to make friends with people I trust that have integrity in the space. So, there's a reason why we're going to be getting together soon and making this happen, my friend. So thank you again. Much love.
Oh,
appreciate
thank you. Blessings.
Thank you for checking out Entrepreneurs of Recovery podcast. We are so appreciative that you are here. Make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. Leave a review on iTunes and Spotify so more people can find the show. Once again, thank you so much. We have great episodes and content come out in the future. Thank you for being here. Have a blessed day.